Hello, and welcome to episode 47 of Charlotte Mecklenburg History with Dan Morrill. Today is Sunday, June 13th, 2021, and I am Dan's daughter, Mary Dana, joining Dan through Zoom. Hey, Dad.
Hey, Mary Dana. Hey, everybody.
And today my dad is going to be talking about the history of the restoration of streetcar number 85 in Charlotte. So that was Charlotte's trolley and the last trolley to run on the line. I guess you'll talk about that more though, Dad, right?
I will. I will.
Okay, so thanks for being here, everybody, and Dad, take it away.
Well, Mary Dana, you know all about this story because you lived it.
I did.
It actually started in 1981. So we are literally 40 years into this project. And it has been a marathon, but it's been a fascinating thing to do. And I think it sort of goes back to what I've said so many times before. You know, I think it's so important to save these artifacts of the past because it gives us perspective. This is not a toy. This is not a sort of a fanciful thing. It is a part of our history. And I want to start out talking about transportation, urban transportation. Man, Dana, you know now we want to go somewhere like 10 miles away. Is that a big deal?
No.
Why is it not a big deal?
Because we have cars, most people.
Yeah, you go out and even if you don't have a car, you just go to the bus stop.
Yeah, or you could do Uber.
Yeah, I mean, you 10 miles is no big deal today. Well, that didn't used to be the case. Now, I was going to start out talking about transportation. And, you know, it was even in the 19th century. This is what trains looked like in about 1880. You could get around, if you lived on a railroad, you could go from city to city pretty rapidly. In fact, this is a timetable of the Charlotte, Columbia, and Augusta Railroad. Now, this railway, which actually is 10 years earlier in 1870, and you could leave Charlotte at 10:15 a.m. and you could be in Augusta, Georgia at 9:40 p.m. So in less than 12 hours, you could go in 1870. You could go from Charlotte to Augusta, Georgia. Now, that might seem like a long time, but if you take into account that before the railroad, it took 5 days for you to go from Charlotte to Raleigh, you can see what living on a railroad meant. So trains were getting pretty good, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, brother, within cities, once you got off that railroad in 1880, you were in deep mud. If you weren't in deep mud, you were on slow dried mud. In fact, this really represents the primary means of, if you will, traveling within a city like Charlotte in 1880. You could walk. You know how people now say, I'm going to get some exercise, I'm going to take a walk.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about getting any exercise walking in 1880. A lot of people walked. You could also ride a bicycle. Now, again, you know, you see bicycles now and they have special lanes. I mean, bicycles were a big deal in 1880, as long as it wasn't muddy. And of course, you had your buggies, your wagons, your carriages. And of course, you were very dependent upon horses and mules. Now, here's a bus. It's not a Charlotte bus, but it's a typical kind of bus that was used in the 1880s. And you can see it's being pulled by horses. Because essentially, you either walked, rode a bicycle, or you were either pulled by a horse or a mule. That's essentially what you had. But the streets were so god awful. Now, this is not Charlotte, it's a typical town, but I mean, that's what city streets look like, especially when it rained. I mean, they were quagmires of mud. There are stories about the fact that People could have their shoe slip off their foot when they're walking about across the street. They never saw that shoe again. It went down in the guggle boo boo anyway. So it was a real challenge. How are you going? Now understand the Industrial Revolution, steam engines, all the machines that spun thread, made cloth, all the new industrial things that were happening, the whole factory system of production. Cities wanted to grow. But you know, if you're going to make a city grow, you've got to be able to get around. Now, there are no automobiles. An automobile, by its own means, says it runs on its own. It's an automobile, not pulled by a horse, not pulled by a mule. It is an automobile. There are none. There are none. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, the most efficient way, and this is still true today, if you're on the ground, the most efficient way to move anything, including people, is a metal wheel on a metal rail, steel wheel on a steel rail, because that creates the least friction. So what cities started to do said, well, we're going to use these horses to pull things. Why don't we have them pull something on a rail? So the first streetcars were horse driven. Now they weren't all horse driven, they were also mule driven. Now you know a mule's got a donkey as a daddy and it's got a horse as a mama. That's what produces a mule.
Right.
And mules have some real advantages. They found out that mules have real advantages over horses because they're more sure-footed. When people ride these trails down the Grand Canyon, they don't ride no horse. They're going to ride a horse. They're going to ride a mule, because mules lived in mountains, deserts and mountains. That's where mules come from. So they're much more sure-footed than a horse. They're much more tolerant to cold and hot weather. They don't panic as often as horses do. So they found out that actually mules were better than horses. But you know, these are streetcars. These are streetcars. These are not trolleys. These are streetcars. You're a mathematician.
That's true.
Trolley is a subset of streetcars. That's what it is. It's a type of streetcar. Now, that was one thing they did, and these were used all over the country in the 1880s. These horse-drawn streetcars, and I'll show you. Now, Charlotte got them. This is a wonderful photograph. You know, you think of this guy who's walking across. You're looking. This is East Trade, looking toward the west on Trade Street. Right there at the top is the intersection of Trade and Tryon. This guy with his hat on walking across the street, he has been immortalized. It probably took him 20 seconds to get across the street, but man, that camera got him. Now, Charlotte got horse-drawn streetcars in 1887. And you know, they were of all people were really excited about these new vehicles where they didn't have to ride bicycles through the mud or get on those crazy buses with wheels and get stuck in the mud. They could ride on rails with horse-drawn streetcars. Now, there is another type of streetcar, and that was experimented with. Those were steam-pulled streetcars. This is a streetcar, and it's got a little steam engine on the front of it. Now, they tried this because that's what ran these locomotives. The steam engine was the basic power of the Industrial Revolution. Well, there were real problems with these things. In fact, this next sort of illustration shows part of it. You can see loud, they created smoke, they were expensive, they were very, very mechanically finicky, and they just didn't work out. They just didn't work out. The steam-powered streetcars. So you had horse-drawn streetcars, mule-drawn streetcars, you had steam-powered streetcars, and then, of course, There is the cable car. Let me ask you a question, Mary Dinah.
Yes.
I'm going to see how astute you are. What kind of an engine does a cable car have?
Well, I thought it just got pulled by the cable
That's
in the ground.
exactly. It doesn't have an engine. It has no engine. You see those two sticks moving up. You see those two sticks up there in the middle of that thing?
Yeah.
Those are the things that move the grip system that grips the cable. And the cable car was used in a lot of cities, but they were very expensive. They had cable cars in Cleveland. They had cable cars in Chicago. They had cable cars. Of course, everybody now thinks about San Francisco because that's the only cable car system left. The real advantage of the cable car was it could pull a steep hill, or it could pull, these horses. They had real problems with these horses. Pulling these streetcars. A lot of times, first of all, they panic sometimes. You'd have runaway streetcars. There are articles in the newspaper about horses bolted. They got spooked about.
Sure.
That's why mules are better about not getting spooked. But even then, it was hard for them to pull hills. Well, cable cars could pull hills, but cable cars. Let me show you. Here's the. Well, if I can get it to work.
Like in San Francisco, they have some pretty steep
There's
hills.
the under. You're looking at the bottom of the track. You see this thing right here?
Yes.
See it? That it's gripping that underground cable. See that thing back there? That's gripping the underground cable. So that's what that guy's doing. He's pulling those. Yeah, he's pulling those sticks back to grip that cable, and the cable's running continuously under the street. In fact, you got to have two cables. You got to have one going this way and one going this way, because according to how you're going, they are extremely expensive. And they're very, very thin. And a town the size of Charlotte, Charlotte's about 15,000 people, maybe. Can't afford a cable car system. So what in the world how are you going to get around? That's now here's the guy. Listen, Mary Dinah, I grew up in Winston-Salem. And we used to go to a place called Singleton's Barbecue in Winston-Salem. And man, I'd eat so many barbecue sandwiches. It was just unbelievable at Singleton's Barbecue. And one of the streets we went down was Sprague Street. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't know anything about history. Now, I know who Frank Sprague was, but Winston had one of the earliest trolley systems in North Carolina. And Frank Sprague was the engineer who invented trolleys. He was the one that he didn't invent trolleys. I don't want to say that. There were trolleys before Frank Sprague, but he was the first one to be able to devise a trolley system that would allow the streetcar to climb steep hills. And he was the man who, for Richmond, Virginia, installed the first citywide trolley system in the United States. Now, of course, a trolley, it's powered by electricity. It's an electric. We had horse-drawn, mule-drawn, right? Steam powered, cable powered. Now this is electric powered. And he came up with this system. You see this overhead wire, right? The overhead wire is carrying direct current electricity. And this pole is going up there, and that little wheel up there at the top, that's what is really the trolley. That's the trolley. The trolley is the device that engages that electric wire. And it looks like you're trolling, like you're, how you go out on
like trolling for fish.
You're trolling for fish. And that's why they called them trolleys. That thing looks like it's trolling. Well, anyway. Now, the great thing about this electric streetcar system was that smaller towns could afford them. And trolleys, electric powered streetcars. I remember when I was trying to restore Streetcar 85, I got people that give me all kinds of trouble. They would say, we called them streetcars, we didn't call them trolleys. Well, that is so stupid. I mean, they're a subset of streetcars. That's what trolleys are. So
Yeah, a
you could
trolley's
do,
just a kind of
a trolley's a
streetcar.
streetcar, a streetcar is not necessarily a
A
trolley.
trolley, yeah.
Okay, got it, got it. Okay.
I got it.
Well, and also they became very popular in the South. Richmond, of course, was the first because the South, of course, was still suffering from the economic destruction that had occurred to the Southern infrastructure as a result of the Great Rebellion of the 1860s, otherwise known as the Civil War. It wasn't a Civil War, but that's what everybody calls it. So the South wanted to prove that it was up to date, that it was really with it. So Southern towns wanted to get streetcars. Now, we've talked about Mr. Latta before.
Mm-hmm.
We had that long podcast on Dilworth, Edward Dilworth Latta.
Yes.
Edward Dilworth Latta was born in South Carolina. He attended Princeton. He never actually graduated. He came here in the 1870s with his brother. He went into the men's clothing business, trouser manufacturing business, made a good bit of money. And he was very much a booster. He was very much wanting Charlotte to be an important place. And he said, well, by Jove, if Richmond's got a blooming streetcar system, we're going to get us an electric trolley system too. We're going to get a trolley line. And one of the things he had to think about was who was he going to hire to put in his trolley line? Well, Mr. Latta said he was going to get the best, Thomas Alva Edison. Now, oh my goodness, the genius of Menlo Park. I mean, this guy's light bulb, good gosh. Well, Edison was in town using experiments to see if they could use electricity to extract gold from ore.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a laboratory over in the old Mint building over on West Trade Street. And Mr. Latta got to know Mr. Edison. And he said, we want us to have an electric streetcar system, and I want you to be the one to design it and put it in. So by Jove, that's what he did. Now, this is the Charlotte Electric Railway Company. Now, by the way, on the front of the car, I think I mentioned, this is made, you might be able to see at the bottom, J.G. Brill, B-R-I-L-L. And it says that they make cable and electric cars. J.G. Brill was located in Philadelphia. They were the most respected manufacturer of streetcars, both cable cars and trolleys. And Mr. Latta and Mr. Edison, and anyway, the deal was made to buy this streetcar. And it's not Streetcar 85. This one's gone. But here's the deal. By putting in a streetcar system, an electric streetcar system, telling it, and by the way, interestingly enough, they still talk about the place where trolleys are taken as a barn. It goes back to the horse mule age. But, he was going to open up a whole new opportunity for real estate development, because now people could get on an electric streetcar and go to the suburb that he was developing, named after his mother, that we talked so much before, and that was Dilworth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first electric streetcar on a trial run ran from Charlotte down South Tryon Street, turned on Morrill, went down South Boulevard, turned left on East Boulevard, and went into Dilworth on the 18th of May, 1891. So Charlotte gets an early electric streetcar system. Now, you know, I've talked about all this before. I don't need to go into it, but trolleys were electric streetcars were a fundamental component of Charlotte's transportation system. In the 1890s, there are no automobiles. How can you live in Dilworth? You can only, and even in 1911, when Myers Park opened, this, of course, as we know, is Hawthorne and 4th Street, and the gateway to Myers Park. Even in 1911, nobody but the super rich. Well, they had the T model Ford. I think it came out about 1908, but they're still really scarce.
Yeah.
And so you gotta have, now, you know, when Queens Road, they're building streetcar track down the middle of the street. Queens Road, look at them building that track. Look at that track they're building. All for the streetcar. This is the section of Queens Road that goes down to what's now Myers Park Baptist Church. And you can see there's one single line going out, because what we now call Queens Road East was the Y, the place where the streetcars turned around. But anyway, they are very, very much, of course, you know, everywhere you looked in Charlotte, there are streetcars. They were here from electric streetcars, trolleys. They were here from 1891 until 1938. And I mean, they were big time. And of course, you can see here's the square. That's the Independence Building, North Carolina's first skyscraper in the background. And you see, of course, the streetcar. Here's East Trade Street. This would be in the 1920s. You can see by then automobiles are beginning to become prevalent. But the streetcars are still, the trolleys are still doing it. And this was headed toward Myers Park. This is coming down East Trade Street. Again, there's the Independence Building looming up there in the back. You can see right there, that's East Trade. Here's South Tryon Street. Now this would have been in the 30s. And you can still see the streetcar. If you look carefully, you can see it coming down the track. So that was just a fundamental part of Charlotte's transportation history. Okay. Now, I have to be careful here because I don't want to be disrespectful to Charlotte. Charlotte's been good to me. I hope I've been good for it. But, you know, Charlotte is a place, you know, I've often said its dream is to be Gotham on the Catawba. Charlotte, to say something's old, bleh. See, streetcars in 1891 were thought to be the latest thing. They were modern. They were they showed you were a big deal.
Right.
Edward Gilbert Latta wanted to make this a big place. Now, Southern Public Utilities Company, or what later became Duke Power, and now it's Duke Energy, they took over the streetcar system from Mr. Latta. I think it was 1911. I believe that was the year. But I know it was right around then. But by 1938, the new thing was gasoline-powered buses, because you have to worry about track. And by that time, the streets were paved. You don't have to worry about that old mud anymore. And practically nobody was riding bicycles. More people ride bicycles now than the only people who rode bicycles in 1938 were kids. But anyway, thus the new day discards the old. They had decided they need to get rid of these streetcars. Now, this was a very symbolic moment. This was, by the way, the afternoon of March 14th, 1938. Let's see, I would have been about six months old. About 6 months old. This is right down the street from where Hawthorne and Elizabeth intersect. You go by this all the time. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Now you can see they've got this streetcar, which is Streetcar 85. Now they chose 85 because it was kind of the biggest and the best of the streetcars they had left. Okay.
Mhm.
That car was manufactured in 1927 by the Pearlie Thomas Company. Do you know what the Pearlie Thomas Company in High Point, North Carolina makes today?
No.
School buses.
Oh, okay.
When they quit making streetcars, they went to making buses, school buses. And if you look at Streetcar 85, it kind of looks like a school bus.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was thinking
it has
that.
that sort of same feel to it. And you can see they parked one of their new fancy gasoline powered buses right behind it to show what was the old and what was the new. Okay,
Mhm.
so this was the end, they thought, of Streetcar 85 and the end of the streetcar era. Now here's the great irony, Mary Dana. The city tore all the tracks up, and they have spent millions in the last 2 years putting the streetcar tracks back. Now they go right up Elizabeth Avenue where this is. But anyway, that's beyond the point. Now the city leaders gathered to take the last ride uptown. And here they are inside Streetcar 85. Now, and the man standing up there, by the way, I know what a lot of people would immediately say, particularly in the age we live in now, the city leaders were all white men, 100%.
I see
They
that.
were not diverse. This was not a priority in 1938. And you can see the man who is standing up there, that is the mayor, Mayor Ben Douglas, for whom Charlotte Douglas International Airport is named. And this is all the big wigs in town. By the way, notice that in those days, a really fashionable man always wore a hat. And they're going to ride up to the square, and they thought they were saying goodbye forever to Streetcar 85. Well, guess what? 1987, we found it. That is the same streetcar
Yeah.
that we saw there. Now, I found this. Man, Dana,
I remember.
I got, oh yeah, because you were 17 years old.
Mhm.
And I was 50 years old. Oh my God, I'm still here. Anyway, here we are. We found it in Huntersville. I got this notion, and I can't go into it. I wish I had time. How am I doing on time? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, we've been talking about 28 minutes.
All right.
We're gonna
I
have
had
to do like a 2-part
well, maybe.
podcast, right?
Anyway, I had this idea. You know, Charlotte needs something that will give it a sense of real heritage. Do you know the biggest investment that the city of Charlotte's ever made in heritage tourism?
No.
The NASCAR Hall of Fame.
Oh, okay.
Now put that in your pipe and smoke it. Now I'm not going to say, and if I don't know how successful the NASCAR Hall of Fame is, but that is the biggest investment the city's ever made. Anyway, I thought, well, we need to get something that reminds Charlotte and the Charlotte area of its history and so forth. Well, anyway, a lot of people thought I was absolutely nuts. There were 3 people living in this thing when it had been condemned because it was unfit for human habitation. You see that little thing in the back with a window?
Yeah, a little shack.
Little shack coming. That was one of the doors of the streetcar. You went through the door of the streetcar on the far end. You went into that little thing, and that's where the kitchen was. And you
Okay.
can see the little smokestack coming in. There was a man, and the bedroom was down here on this end, where they're kind of close to us. And whatever else was dining room, living room, everything else was at the other end. And then they had the kitchen, and they went next door to go to the bathroom.
Oh, okay. I was wondering where they went to the bathroom.
So it had been declared unfit for human habitation.
Mhm.
Well, I said, and we need to restore this streetcar. Now, me and Dana, a lot of people thought I was absolutely bonkers.
I
And
remember.
when it went, and
Oh, there you are.
there I was at age 50. You're very close to your age, Mary Dana.
Yeah, that's my age.
I was talking about showing a picture of what the streetcar could look like. Because a lot of people said, "You're crazy, man. You're crazy." Moss Trucking Company, to their ever-loving credit, donated moving the streetcar. And here they are putting it on a flatbed truck, and bless it, there it is, going up David Street in Huntersville, headed towards Charlotte to begin, and I do mean to begin, a restoration process. And I do mean a restoration process. Mary Dana, it took from 1987 until 1996 to complete the restoration of this car.
Mm-hmm.
It had no seats. It had no motor. It had no wheels. It had no controllers. All it had was that.
Right.
But at least it was sound structurally. You know, it could hold together. So we took it now. This picture was taken to the inside of the car, and I can tell you this was a long time after restoration had begun. It says, yeah, that's 1987, 1996. Here they're putting the seats in. And by the way, I had to raise over $200,000 to restore the streetcar.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the seats flipped. When the car came to the end of the line, you just took that trolley up on the wire and you just hinged it over and put it back. And then you just flip the seats over. Well, I got 2 donors for every seat. So that when you went one way, it was one donor would show, and you flip the seat, it'd be another donor. I was using every way in the world I could to raise money. But I tell you, we had a whole band of volunteers that labored countless hours to restore this car. And I do have to say, this man here.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, I've never really been a big groupie person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care anything about going out with the boys and playing golf or going hunting. I mean, some people like vanilla, some people like chocolate. I don't criticize, but therefore, there are relatively few men that I've really had kind of a close relationship with, a friendship with.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of them. Chris Allen was really a good man.
Mm-hmm. I remember him.
But more than that, he was the man that restored that streetcar. I raised the money and he did the work.
Mm-hmm.
And he did more than was necessary because he cared. It wasn't just something he was doing. He was passionate about restoring historic mechanical equipment. And I miss Chris, and anybody that knew him, he was truly a great guy. And here, the restorers are there, and Chris is on the far right, kind of leaning,
Mm-hmm.
kind of looks. That's Chris. I'm 2 over. You can see me with a camera.
I see you with the camera.
And I just can't say enough about. Now remember what we started with. Here's this car when it was finished. Remember what we started
Yeah, I do. It's amazing transformation.
Go from that to that. Okay. And here was the inaugural event. Your grandmother was there, Margaret Caldwell. This was in 1996, and this was gathered there on the tracks between South End and Uptown, and the trolley was a huge success. And you know, what better thing can you do than have something that brings joy to people's lives? You know, human life, as you well know, is a journey, and it's a job. And you know, the all kinds of people came to this streetcar. It
Yeah.
operated from 1996 to about, I didn't check the, about 2005.
Hmm.
And it was tremendously successful because there is a glory to it. You know, it wasn't high tech, it wasn't air conditioned, but there was something very special about it to people, and it was great. And
It was fun to ride. It
yeah,
was. I
here's
remember.
another man that deserves a tremendous amount of credit. Tony Presley. He was the head of Mecca Properties. He was the project property manager for the owners of the property down at the Atherton Cotton Mill on South Boulevard. And Tony, you know, you have to have three things for something to run on track electrically. You got to have a power source. You got to have a car to run on the tracks, and you got to have the tracks. You
Hmm.
don't have the tracks, you haven't done anything. And he had the vision to work with those property owners to allow us to be able to put that trolley there in South End. And of course, it came out of storage. And by the way, it is going to go to a new place. Tomorrow night, the Historic Landmarks Commission, which owns Streetcar 85, is going to take under consideration allowing the streetcar to go to Belmont, North Carolina. And this is a architect's rendering of the proposed trolley barn in Belmont, North Carolina. You used to live in Belmont.
I did. That's a great place for the
And
trolley to go, I think.
I think it's in the Charlotte area, and it fulfills the dream. It's going to be, I truly do believe we finally found the right place. South End, we had to relinquish South End for basically the light rail line, which now runs up the track. And for complications of the federal government and so forth, the compatibility of the streetcar with those, and it wouldn't have been the same. It wouldn't have been. Belmont's got the right kind of environment, the right kind of place. So, Mary Dinah, you know, I look back, what
Where's
all
it gonna run in Belmont?
when
Where?
it's going to run from basically, you know, where the old terminal building is down on
Hmm.
North Main Street in Belmont.
Yeah, where they use it as the museum.
Yeah, well, it's going to run basically from there up to Belmont Abbey.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah,
And
that'll work well.
and the track's already been
Yeah.
repaired. The track's in
Oh.
place, and the town is all totally for it. They've
Mhm.
actually committed funds to it, and we are so excited that finally this vision of creating, and it's going to be tremendously successful.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, as to how the car's going to run, the car's ready to run. It's a
Mhm.
matter of working out all the logistics, but I really do believe that it is safe to say that we're on the way toward putting that car again back into use so it can create the same magic that it did at South End.
Mhm.
And you know, Mary Dana,
It's a marathon, like you said.
it's
It's a
been a
marathon.
marathon. It's been a marathon. But if I tell you, the communities that really embrace history are the ones where history helps the local economy.
Mhm.
It's the Charlestons,
Right.
it's the Wilmingtons, you know, it's those kinds of cities. And Belmont has bought into the fact that the small town quaint feel of that town is a real asset, and that the trolleys can enhance that. And I think that's why. And interestingly enough, Tony Presley's son, Rob Presley, is a major figure in this Belmont operation. And so there's a real continuation, if you will.
Mhm.
And I hope everybody goes and rides it, takes their kids to ride it, and enjoys it.
Do they know when? Do they have a timeline for when it will start running?
I think I'm going to try to get Rob Presley to come on a future podcast
Oh,
to
great.
talk about the Belmont initiative from his perspective and answer a lot of those questions.
Oh, okay, great. That sounds great. Okay, well, you've talked for 40 minutes. Are you done?
Yep.
Okay, gosh. Okay, well, that worked out well. All right, well, everyone, thanks for being with us, Dad. Thank you. That's really exciting news about the trolley, and I will definitely be going to ride Streetcar 85 and look forward to riding it again. It's been a long
We
time.
gotta have the opportunity to do that together before I die.
Well, hang in there, Dad. Glad you're still with us.
Yep.
Okay, we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.